What's going on, guys? So, today on this kind of review slash build log, we're going to be going over this Shoky Custom Minitolf. And for those who've seen it, yeah, it's a tiny one of those. Now, it doesn't necessarily have a scale, but I did the math, and I think it's roughly a 18.3, like 1/18th scale. So that's roughly 3 3/4 height for like GI Joes or whatever. But I wanted to go ahead and do this video as I'm in the middle of doing the second one. So this is going to be kind of the how-to versus the or there's going to be kind of a how-to and a review, so to speak. So it's all scratch built. It does contain just sheet and or styrene sheet and styrene like rod. Now I believe it was 0.04 sheet to get this at this scale, and then this super itty bitty rod. Like, I don't even know offhand. I'll have to find the packaging for it. I'll find the packaging. So using this tiny little bitty rod, then tools you'll need: basic hobby knife. If you have one, use your chopper. That was not secured. If you need to use just a normal knife to help cut as well. You need some kind of straight edge. I use my metal ruler to also help me out a little bit. And then you also need some plans. Now, this is legit from the IKEA website. If you go over there, you can actually get this exact image off of the Detolf listing. And that's what I did. Now, as for the size, I believe I printed this out at 60%. I could be wrong. I'm pretty sure it was 60%. And basically got this size. So if you really want to know the actual measurements of this image right here, which is what I based all this off of, it's 89 millimeters tall, 24 millimeters wide, 20 thereabouts millimeters deep, and then just ever so slightly inside that. And this is also your guide for laying out your rods. So we'll go through the pictures. And so first up, of course, I just did the thing. So I cut out the squares for the top and the bottom, and then just got them to the exact size I needed to, and then just laying them out on the piece of paper to get the design. I marked roughly where the holes were going to go for the rods, and then I used my super tiny drill bit that is the 3/64. So that's actually a hair too big. Like, it's actually oversized by just a hair. So something close to that, maybe just a hair smaller, whatever would be in between 1/32 and 3/64, whatever the math would be there, I don't know, would probably be exactly what you need. So it'll be a slightly oversized hole. I mean, you could always use the tip of your knife and just get it close, or try to glue it on straight if you want. Now, initially I drilled the holes only about 3/4 of the way into the plastic, but then I ended up having to go a little bit deeper anyway, so I just went all the way through. That's how I actually got the holes lined up top to bottom. Just layered the two pieces like that, and then just drilled down through. Now, this caused some odd alignment issues later, but I ended up dealing with that. Oh, so quick addendum. It's actually the 0.04 rods. So 040 right there. And these are, of course, all evergreen scale models. Usually pick them up at most hobby stores you can get them from. Now, another thing I did for this, it's a tiny bit of a secret, but I'll get there. I got some 0.04 square strips. That's going to come in handy later. So after I had the holes lined up, I did actually go ahead and build the lattice or ladder section of the uprights, just laying it down on the paper. You know, this is your thing. So line up the thingies, glue them in place. Now you can use your good old super glue if you want it to set pretty quick, or if you're going to use some extra thin cement like so. We've talked about that. Any model maker worth their salt generally has some type of cement around. It's very good for it because you're doing something small. You don't want to end up losing or adding anything because you like too much super glue. And then once that was settled, basically just lined it up with me holes, glued them together top and bottom. Now this is where I had an issue, and I did end up having to fix it later. So keeping it square, especially with something as flimsy as this tubing, was very much impossible. So I actually used, or tried to use, I should say, these two jars, one at either end to keep things square. Unfortunately, these are not super flat surfaces. They're actually kind of either dished or slightly domed. So that made things a little bit awkward and actually ended up with a misalignment on my initial one. And I can show off here. You can see where the light's catching that? Yeah. So that ended up being a divot where I ended up drilling out from the top and having to push it down. So instead of being basically perfectly flush, one was like this. Kind of like an actual Detolf. Everything about constructing this is very much like having a full-size real Detolf. If you haven't built one, that's just how they go together. And that was just, it made sense. Build it the way it is built. You have your upright rods, you put it top and bottom, you glue them into place. And then what's really funny, so I have this next stage of rod right here. I don't know where the packaging is, so I can't tell you exactly what size it is. It's a good size rod though. I actually cut that into little bitty feetsies like that. You can see against my forehead. And that's actually butted up to hold the rods in place, just like the real Detolf. And in building the second one here, that's actually what I did to try to keep things square to some degree. So this was drilled 100% all the way through to make sure all my alignment was about as good as it was going to get. And then I had to waller out the holes way too big because these ones didn't stay as square or as good as they should have. So this one's a little bit wonky, but it won't be noticeable in the final product. It's really hard to keep tight tolerances like that square. So ultimately, these feet here are legit holding these vertical rods in place. Now, since I still have one here that's in a skeleton version, so to speak, you can see still kind of flimsy. I don't want to push on it because I just clear coated that. But it is not super strong. It is just good enough. Just like that. And like I said, it's about 1/18 scale, thereabout. So you get some of the same issues. Now, from there, paint time. So I used a combination of just priming the whole thing in white, getting it all good, sanding it nice and smooth because I had some spots where the glue was really nasty. Then hitting it with a base coat of, initially I thought German gray. I do have some test pieces, or I had some test paint pieces here, trying to figure out the best way to get this kind of mocha color. This is not black, it's like what they call black brown, which is like a dark mocha color. So I used a combination of doing a bottom layer of, if I had flat black, I would have used it. I didn't have any of that. I had rubber black, which was fine. So I did the entire base coat of rubber black on top of the primer. And then I just did red brown, like, but not solid color, just a light misting, and try to get it a little bit random because this does have some wood grain look to it, some actual kind of wood look to it. So just different corners of it I hit with different levels of paint. And then I did the same thing with the secondary one here. And then after that was pretty well dry, I took my smoke clear. I have my smoke clear that I'm using for a different project. I need to get more of it now that I've done this, and just did a couple light passes of that, and it gives it this nice darker color. So it wasn't nearly this dark, it was a lot more brown. So that's how I got it to be the proper kind of color. And you can see here on the bottom how it's a little bit more brown, because that's where the last little bit of sticky was to hold that. I don't like that. Oh, feel movement. That's odd. Something in there is moving and it shouldn't be. So once that was settled, I hand painted these silver. It is, to me, a silver leaf, and I sprayed it into a thing and then brushed it on. I don't like it, but it's mine. It's fine. I can live with it. Now this one is not for me. So what I'm gonna do, haven't done it yet, but what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna mask off as much as I can near the bases. Mask off anything I don't want silver and just give it a couple quick bursts, so I can get a good even coat of silver on all those rods. If I need to, I'll just mask off everything at the base, and then if I have to just do a couple little touch-ups with the brush, like right down here, then I will. Now, one thing I want to point out, I forgot to mention this. You can see there's a ridge around the outside. So when it came to needing to add the glass, so to speak, I didn't have a good way to secure it. Originally, I was actually etching it with a knife, and I'm just gonna sit it in there, but there's not enough thickness there to really make it happen. So that is actually that square rod that I pointed out earlier. Just lined up to the edge, glued in place, and then cemented and sanded flush so that at least from 3 sides, it looks like the glass is set in. So you can see here, the glass, I don't know if it's really gonna focus for me. Nope, it's not gonna focus. I'll have close-up shots. So the glass is actually sitting inside that ridge, because with the real Detolf, they're going into grooves that are cut into it with a really nice CNC machine. They make sure everything is perfect. Now, for the glass. Somebody already properly deduced that it is plastic from an action figure container. Now, which one to use? I have a ton of different action figure packaging still laying around, especially from new stuff. Stuff from Transformers, these bigger statue boxes, DX9, stuff like that. Fortunately, a thing I just reviewed came with something I needed. And I really wanted some nice, really hard angles to work with. It's a loud vehicle outside. And conveniently, I have this. So, as a maker, as a scratch builder, you look for anything you can use. Look at this super hard corner. Perfect. Now, the only thing that sucks about it, this entire bottom section where it says something Ranger, pretty useless. So you only have this top section here, which is about 6 mil, if that, extra than the Minitolf. And then also to do the door is just a clean slice of anything out here. Now, what I did, and I don't know that I have enough pictures of this, I didn't want it to be all 4 separate pieces and trying to fit it in place like this, because there are no plastic retainers to hold the corners. So I just used this hard corner as one, did my measuring, measured over enough space to get my next bend, scored it with a knife, like didn't cut all the way through, just I had a knife with a broken tip and not very sharp, just scored it using a metal ruler, and then just bent it in. In fact, I actually scored the side that was already bent just a little to give it a little bit more flex, because it was just a hair too rigid and was deforming. And then I cut off the excess to size so that it would fit to size. And then here's the weird part. So I couldn't get it over that lip now that I've got a U-shaped box. So I ended, for the rear shelf, so to speak, ridge that retains it, I actually cut it up just a hair. So the sides are still full length, but the inner edge is cut, just a little, both top and bottom, so that it would clear. So all I had to do was make sure the sides bent in just a little to pop into place. It worked. It was really rough. Actually, scratched a little bit of the paint off, but whoop-de-doo, it's not that big a deal. And then that's going to be in place. Now, that is the only part that's still pretty removable. It's not the easiest thing to remove, but it's doable. Probably something I'm going to change on this second Detolf that I'm doing. Now, for the shelves, very similar process. Just got my width, and I cut a single strip and cut it into 3 equal spaces. Now, a little trick, those aren't going to stay in place. There's nothing heavy sitting on them. Gravity is definitely not going to work in your favor for something this tiny. Oddly enough, thin cement does work on this plastic. It's not 100%, it's not super melty, but it's enough, especially if you did a little bit of like sanding to get a bite to it. So for all of the little minifigs I put in there, one is that my painted Osamu Asano, or Asano, either way, from Age, the scrapper that I got from the Pacific Rim build. I don't know who this was or what kit this was from, but it's another pilot figure with a helmet, and I painted it to look like Master Chief. See some of the in progress pictures here. That was a very, very quick paint job. By the way, I added the base to that. This one, unlike the Osamu that actually had a little base, the Master Chief one did not. That's just a little tiny piece of styrene sheet cut and shaped and glued to the feet, and then painted real quick to look like an alien surface. So these are basically supposed to replicate like 1/6 scale figures, like Hot Toys, stuff like that, or a big like Masterpiece Transformer. And then of course at the bottom is the head of the Revive Gundam HG. So I'm sitting there looking, I'm like, I need a Gundam head. I've got to find something. So I was like, at first I was going to use, it's laying here, this little guy left over from the Gujin Rebake Full City. And it was too big. It would have fit, but I would have had to angle it. And I'm like, you know what? This needs to be the Gundam head. And so I was digging through one of the boxes of spare parts from the builds from the Rampage build, and found that I made that little tiny base. So obviously, you know, the neck isn't going to work. So it is the neck of the Gundam, but then that's a cuff. That's the wrist cuff, inverted, with a piece of sheet glued to the bottom, and then the neck protrudes down through it and sits flush. And then that's glued. I scraped off some of the paint and I glued that straight to the styrene. All of the things are cemented to the shelves that they're on, and then the shelves are cemented to the support frame. Now all I did was just my best to scrape the paint down to bare plastic again, laid on some cement, and just let it sit there under its own force until it wouldn't move again. That added so much rigidity. You can see the pictures here. That already reinforced a ton, which is really funny. And then adding the glass surround to it really stiffened it all up. And then for the door, measured roughly the same gap. I wanted it to have just the tiniest gap on either side, like the real one does. And so cut that strip out. It's full length this time. There's no need to gap. That rim doesn't go all the way around. And then took the tiniest little piece of thin strips. I don't even know what size that was. So just real super thin strips. It's probably like 0.010 thick, and then just the tiniest little strips of it to simulate the door hinge and then the clamps and stuff like that. And then I did 8 of those, I'm sorry. So outside and inside, glued at the corners, hand painted them silver, except for the side that needed to be glued. And then I scraped off the paint at the 4 corners of the posts and then glued it to the post. So the front door is glued in place, essentially. Like it's got some flex. You can see the little bow in it just a little bit, which is so like a real Detolf. It's kind of crazy. but it is glued in place. So this version, the back, the entire surround section around the three other sides is one whole wraparound piece, and the door is removable. I think I'm going to do the opposite on the secondary one, because I want who this is going to be able to customize it uh, to their own accord. So this one was made for me, you know, putting things in it that are very much me, Master Chief, Gundam, a robot, stuff like that. This one, I want them to be able to do their own kind of personality to it, so to speak. Um, and by the way, those are not straight. They're pretty close. So I think what I'll do to make it easier, since there is no retaining strip on the front side of the door section, I think I'll glue the back in place and then have the front, the entire front. That wasn't good. Power just flickered. I think I'll have the whole front slide into place. So like all 3/4 sides of it will just go, and then it'll kind of stay. So I can do that idea without fully executing it, because it'll be the same regardless of which direction I take it from, just whether or not I cut the top strips off. But I will post pictures if I do that differently. Obviously, I'm still mid build of this as I'm making this review. Now the second one has come out slightly darker than the first, but it still looks really nice. But there's a hint of wood grain with the way I sanded it. So I left it intentionally sanded a little rougher in one direction. So it kind of looks like wood grain, which these do sort of have, just fake wood grain, you know. But side by side, you can see that they're almost the same height. The only difference is that the feet on my one are a little bit longer. I'm actually going to sand them down to make it equal height. So, what does this mean for the Minitolf? Well, I have been commissioned to make at least one, potentially two. The second one will be of a different dimensions, different scale, which is going to be a little harder to do, but not 100% impossible, at least to my mind. But this is a fun, totally random project. It came about because of a joke, I believe, from a live stream that I was doing. And for those going, well, is there even a point to having a tiny Detolf? Yes, there is, because it's going to be the primary weapon of the IKEA Gundam, whatever that's going to be. I don't have 100% a plan for it, but there will be an IKEA Gundam sometime in the future, and this will be his primary melee weapon. He will literally beat people to death with a Detolf because it's hilarious. As for the other one, whoever it's going to can determine what they're going to do with it. But there is one other main purpose for this, and it is 100% to have a tiny Detolf in a Detolf. Yep. But I'll catch you guys next time. Oh, and by the way, I will post up the plans as an image, or you guys can just go get them. Hopefully I can link it down below, at least to the IKEA site, so you can print it off yourself if you want to. And then I want to see you guys make your own Minitolfs to the best of your ability. Just do what you're going to do. I think it'll be funny. If you don't want to do it in the exact same scale I did, that's fine. Make your own. But I want to see some Minitolfs out there. Make it happen. And remember, as always, to keep on building.